Get Trump out. It's our responsibility as activists, as leaders, as people that might have a following. I can't wait until November 4th so I can be honest about Biden.
Rida, Nusayba, Bakr, thank you so much for joining me on this discussion. I want to start off with the very heavy question, which is what are your feelings and emotions right now leading up to the election?
A lot of people aren't excited about the Democratic nominee. People have different thoughts on this throughout the community. We already know our community is not a monolith, right? Our community has never really had anyone loyal to one political party in the United States. Unfortunately, I think we're going to see a lot of Muslims abstaining for that reason and not participating in the election. And I say unfortunately because, I do think that despite the issues with the Democratic nominee, we do need to be involved and we do need to stay participating. And one of the ways we do that is by exercising our right to vote. This is something we should not take lightly. Like, our right to vote is not something we should take lightly.
Bakr, as someone who works with the grassroots, who works with Muslim Americans across the country, what are the sentiments that you see of Muslim Americans leading up to the elections?
How do Muslims feel about the campaign? When they look at Trump, they feel one way. When they look at Biden, they feel differently. That's the problem, right? Generally speaking, we're 1% of the population. We're irrelevant. Doesn't matter. Like, we will not decide what America decides, right? The only times that we can make a difference on a federal level is when there's a close election, as is coming up right now, and as the ones that have passed very recently. When Kerry was defeated by W. Bush back in 2004, if 30,000 people in Ohio voted differently, then Ohio would have flipped the other way. So 30,000 Muslims in Ohio could have changed that election. There's very few times that we can make a difference. This is one of them right now. I can't wait until November 4th so I can be honest about Biden and start working against him, working for what we want, for our needs and needs of this country.
Even if Joe Biden is the better candidate, is he the right candidate?
We have to decide who's going to hold the power. And fact of the matter is, we have a maniac in the office right now, and he has to be out. So I don't like Biden. I'm not a fan, but he's the only candidate, because we need to get Trump out. And then, just like Bakr said, then we need to push him as hard as we can to get to the right policy positions.
This election is not just about the presidential election. The reason that we need to exercise our rights to vote in so many states is because there are critical Senate and House races that we need to make sure we elect the right candidate in those races. It's really critical. It's a really critical time for our country, especially with the passing of RBG, to elect a Senate that is going to make the right decisions. And we do have power in many states where we have a really significant population of Muslims. And if we can manage to unite and collectively put our organizing power together, as we've seen throughout the past year, where we're organizing as a collective, we're working together. If we can continue to do that, then we can really be a significant voice in so many of these critical states with important races this election.
Maybe this is a little different actually from the last 4 years, because a lot of Trump's decisions did impact us on a daily level, but generally your local elections impact you far greater than what's going on at the federal level. But unfortunately, our community isn't really plugged in to their local elections and their local politics. And so they only get activated, during a presidential election. And then they're left with two options that don't really fit them. And so then it's either, this prophetic, like, oh no, we need to vote for this person so all of our problems get solved. Or it's this, both of them are horrible, I want nothing to do with it. When at the end of the day, if they're voting, at the local level, that's what impacts them. But unfortunately, our community just really isn't plugged into that as much as would benefit us. And maybe, inshallah, that's something we can change this time around.
As we know, America is ridden with protests right now against systematic police suppression of African American and other minority communities. Would things have been any different had anyone other than Trump been in power? And the reason I ask that is because we know very well that this is not a new issue. It's something that has been going on for decades. And as we know, the Black Lives Matter movement, in fact, started under Obama's presidency. So with that in mind, would electing Joe Biden or even, for example, someone like Bernie Sanders really help fix the issue?
a memory of Obama after Trayvon Martin's killer's verdict came out. And Obama came out and said, he could have been my son. That's like one of these memories that's ingrained in my memory, that even a black president could have changed how racist America is. You know, that was like one of these moments where it's like, wow, like I couldn't believe it. The problem with the Trump administration, it's normalized this racism. Trump kind of reignited that flame and he normalized it. And that's gonna last, like he probably took the country back a generation or two with what he did. Bernie or Biden, whoever comes in the White House, can make a difference just because if you're empowered by the government, it's different than not being empowered by the government, whether you're the police officers or some white supremacists online or whatever. There can be a difference. They can contain, but they can eliminate. They can make policies to try to eliminate it throughout the generations. It's not a switch.
What I think we should be talking about is, not one individual, but what we need in this country. And what we need is not just reform, but a complete shift in the way that our country views safety and in the way that our country protects Black and brown people. It's really just so painful. Like, it's really been an emotional few days with the non-indictment of Breonna Taylor's killers. And, let's not forget that 30 to 40% of American Muslims are Black Americans. This is an issue that should be deeply important to all American Muslims, because our history in the United States is intertwined with the Black freedom struggle. What I think we need a complete uproot of the current system we have in place. And that's something that, unfortunately, we haven't seen any presidential candidate take a strong enough stance on. What we should be saying and pushing for and advocating for, and a lot of communities and organizations and movements are pushing for, is to defund the police. You need to have a system in place where instead of calling 911, you're able to call, social services. You're able to call call for social workers for help, because there are many cases that innocent people are killed when they're just seeking help in this country. And it's really sickening. It's absolutely horrible.
What's tough about answering this question, Nuri, is that Biden has a bad track record when it comes to race relations, right? He's authored terrible bills in the past. He has horrible quotes. What's confusing to me personally is I don't know how malleable he is, right? Like we've seen that Trump is not malleable at all. He does not care what anybody says or thinks. The Democratic Party is carried by the Black American community, right? I mean, that is part of the Democratic machine. Now, unfortunately, there's a history of the Democratic Party using those votes to get into office, but then really not turning around and doing anything for that community. Will the Democratic Party and will the Democratic nominee actually start listening to its base, the people that actually vote the Democrats into office? I don't know. I hope so, but I don't know.
I want to ask you guys now the dark question, which is if Trump wins, and I think we forget just how likely it is that Trump may win, what is our responsibility? What do Muslims do if Trump is reelected?
There are a lot of organizations that are planning to take action once this election, starting November 4th. That's when we really need to step up across the United States, and we really need to show up and take action. So the organizing starts now, but the real hard work will start on November 4th. And we may not have the results for weeks or even months. And so what we need to have is to have unity, we need to have power, and we need to have discipline. No matter who wins, whether it's Biden or Trump, we need to continue organizing for progressive policies at every level of government.
We keep pushing, we keep fighting, we do it as a unified force, but we pray.
As a final question to each one of you, what would you say the responsibility is of American Muslims leading up to the election? What piece of advice do you want to leave any Muslim Americans who are watching right now?
Organize in local politics. Start in the grassroots. Have an identity as a Muslim American. So you don't have to line yourself with progressives or with conservatives or with liberals or with whatever. It's okay to have your ideas as a Muslim and be an American and organize on a local level and start working.
To any of my fellow Muslims who are thinking of abstaining because their conscience just won't let them vote either way, I would really just reiterate that now is not the time to vote your conscience. Now is the time to decide who is going to run this country. You have two choices. You really only have two choices. So make a choice. I would say that, make a choice. It's so easy to volunteer now. You do it from home in your pajamas, in bed. You text from your computer. You call from your computer, from your own cell phone. It's so easy. Volunteer.
Think of how you'll feel, the day after the results are announced. And if Trump announces victory, how will you feel if you abstained? And that's just the thing that I keep reminding myself. And what I would encourage everyone to do from any background, any faith background, anyone, is to join us at Move On, mobilizetowin.org. I have to put a plug in and say we're trying to organize young voters, new Americans. We're trying to organize people from our communities to get out the vote, because it's really important, not just for the federal election again, or presidential election, but it's important for state Senate races, for Congress. We need to make sure that we're represented in every area and level of government.